No.
Awesome. Welcome, friends who are joining us from all over. My name is Chrissy Stonebreaker Martinez. I'm so glad that you're all coming in to circle with us tonight. We're hoping to share stories, do some truth telling, and exploring together. Today is the United Nations International Day of Peace, and unfortunately, the United Nations relies on militarized forces around the world to keep peace, but we at Christian Peacemaker Teams and the InterReligious Task Force on Central America and Colombia, we know that we are called to be peacemakers, and that is an active and disciplined responsibility. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how militarism is experienced alongside the stories of resistance to violence from several of the communities that we work alongside. I'll be introducing our esteemed panelists tonight. All the folks on this panel are amazing fighters for revolutionary love in many different facets. That is so exciting to me and inspiring. And it reminds me something that I learned while I was in Colombia with our partners, our joint partners, IRTF and CPT, that not only is hope a discipline, it is also a duty. And so these people each give me great inspiration, and also some of them are new to my life, so I'm excited to get to know them better through this conversation as well. So I'm just going to give a little bit of introductions while folks, if you're able to write your greetings in the chat, tell us where you're coming from and maybe how we can call you. And if you have any questions at any time in the chat, we have our wonderful Canada and Turtle Island Support Network Coordinator, Rochelle, who will be managing the chat box for y'all. And also on our call today is Alicia, the Development Coordinator for CPT, and is managing the tech side of things. So thank you both so much. We are so grateful. And I would be remiss without giving some acknowledgement as well to Karen Flores Vindell from La Ceiba, Honduras in Central America. She's a language interpreter and translator from English to Spanish and Spanish to English, who's participated in the International Exchange Program that serves with Mennonite Central Committee at the United Nations office. She's also part of the translation team of CPT, Mennonite World Conference, and Women Doing Theology in Latin America. We're so excited and grateful to have her sharing her skills with us today. And she's a member of the Mennonite Evangelical Church of San Pedro Sula and of La Ceiba. So Karen, thank you so much for your work tonight. We're really grateful that we're able to broadcast all of this work in both Spanish and English tonight. It's really special to us. So if you're having a hard time hearing someone, you might want to go to the bottom of your chat of your Zoom call and click on the button that says language interpretation. You're supposed to click on the one that you want to listen in. And so our other translator for the night is Pierre Shantz, who's been with Christian Peacemaker Teams for many years. He's such an amazing compa, and we're grateful that he is translating from, let me get this right, Spanish to English. No, English to Spanish for our Spanish speaking friends. And Karen will be doing the Spanish to English for our English speaking friends. Got it now. Awesome. Okay, so like I said, I'm Chrissy, and I am coming to you tonight from Siouan, Algonquin, and Iroquois-speaking lands in Cleveland, Ohio, and the United States. And it's important to me that when we make land acknowledgements that we recognize that people are still in existence and still here fighting for their sovereignties and our sovereignties to be recognized. My family, I'm a descendant of Embera peoples and in Colombia, and that is a trauma of being displaced from my ancestral traditions is a trauma that I'm seeking to heal as someone here. So we also want to acknowledge that there's work to be done around solidarity and that we commit to doing work, not just acknowledgement, right? And our friends will be sharing a little bit about where they're coming from as well. And so the first friend that we have up tonight to give us some of her experiences is Celeste. And she's the executive director of the Sky Woman's Garden and the project lead of Girigemi Gamek, which is Ojibwe for We Will Plant Lodge. And Celeste is from the Wolf Clan. She's Haudenosaunee and is Oneida Mohawk from the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. As an intergenerational trauma survivor, she's made it her lifetime's mission to help women rebuild their connections to the land and their lifeways. We need that work. Thank you, Celeste. I need that work. Celeste is a seed steward, a traditional agriculturalist, and former professor of traditional ecological knowledge at Niagara College. Her traditional ecological knowledge comes from a strong connection to her family's agricultural traditions of 30 years of personal community gardening experience. She continues to educate herself through ceremony and engagement with traditional healers and agricultural experts from her territory and around the world. And also, she's an Indigenous education consultant at the District School Board of Niagara, and the Niagara Catholic School Board, where she holds regular workshops for both students and teachers and administrators. As a speaker, she's traveled extensively, and there's so much amazing work that she has done. I could go on and on, but her current work centers around Indigenous education, food sovereignty, land access, and Indigenous human rights. And so thank you so much, Celeste, for being with us today. I'm really grateful to hear from you right now.
That's okay. How are you? I'm having a little bit of a problem with my mute button. I'm not sure, but I'll just hold down the space bar. I don't know what's happening on my end, but can everyone hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, fantastic. Okay. All right, Sagoli, everyone. I'm sorry about the long bio. I must have sent you the long one. But okay, great. So I know. Oh man. So we're talking about militarism. We're talking about women. We're talking about and that is, it works perfectly with what kind of I've been doing. I was talking earlier in the room about how it's hunting season coming up in Canada, right? So according to our traditions, when the leaves on the sumac tree turn red, blood red, that's when it's time to hunt in our eastern woodlands here. So I'm from around the Great Lakes, and so this is one of the signs that we use to hunt. And so in a colonial society, there are rules for everything, including hunting. So we are often because land has been stolen, we are often put off into the corners. We're put into cities and this sort of thing. So we don't have access to our traditional lands. So I first met CPT when I was working with Six Nations Right to Hunt. And that is an initiative that we worked for. This is the 8th year now that it's been going on. And Six Nations is my reserve. It's the biggest reserve in Canada. We are Haudenosaunee people. Often known in the States as Iroquois. I am Oneida. And so we were given a tract of land, we came out of our traditional homelands, which is underneath the Great Lakes. And so we came and we were given a tract of land called the Haldeman Tract, which is 6 miles on either side of the Grand River. We were made to leave America when America became America because we supported the British in the War of 1812. So we were kicked out of the United States, and we were put, the followers of Joseph Brant, which is one of our ancestors, and we were put in this spot. Well, it was quite a large tract of land. It's now a tiny reserve about this big. So you go to something like this, down to something like this now. So you can imagine it's the biggest reserve in Canada. We have a really big population, and we have nowhere to hunt. So what we've been doing is we've been working with the colonial government, the traditional chiefs, and we basically made an agreement with the government that we need to hunt. So we're going to hunt in some crown land, which actually, when you say crown land in Canada, that's actually Indian land, or land that's been given or that was taken from us and held by the government. I'm not sure what it's called in the States, but that's what it's called here. It's called crown land. And so, and often what they do with this crown land packages, and I know they do this all over the world, is they make them into national parks or provincial parks. So, and in those parks, there is no hunting allowed. So what we did was we made the agreement, and there's also, the Ministry of Natural Resources that conserves, all the animals. So we made an agreement with them that we would go into 3 provincial parks in Southern Ontario. We would be, and we would conduct our traditional hunting, our traditional bow hunting for deer, because deer is a really important animal for us as Haudenosaunee. We need to have the deer for our ceremony. We need to have it for our food. And there's a really big problem with lack of food and lack of food sovereignty. That's why I work on food sovereignty issues. So this was a great plan. We're working. This could even be seen as a great reconciliation piece. We're working with government. Everything's positive. Well, of course, a lot of settlers did not like this. They didn't want us going into their park and taking their deer. And so we had a buildup of police officers, of MNR, of federal, provincial, and regional police around this park. And so we had CPT help us navigate this. And so here we are, we have a positive agreement, and as with many things that happens, we're not supported by settlers. So they said, no, you're not going into this park. We're going to stop you. We're going to pull you out of your cars. We're going to spit on you. We're going to key your cars. We're going to be really angry. And it was really frightening. So CPT heard about this, and they came down to basically help our men and our young men, because this again is often a learning experience between our young men, our nephews, and our uncles. Going out hunting. So this was one of the things that I was involved in. So 8 years, we finally got it down to the point where there are not as many police. The police are now supporting us. They're no longer letting the settler protesters do whatever they're doing. And so we're getting more positive response. Now, all across Canada at this point, we've got all kinds of things happening that are not as positive. We have right now, we have the lobster fishermen in Nova Scotia, and that's a huge situation happening right now. What's happening is lobster fishermen, settler lobster fishermen are going in, and they're attacking, ramming the boats, they're shooting flares at Indigenous fishermen who have a treaty agreement to use our land and to have access to land. So now they're going to militarize that. They're going to send in more police. They're going to send in probably army, and it's just gonna escalate. So this happens all over Canada. I mean, there's moose hunting going on where there's you know, so it's a big problem. And so what the government does is, without even thinking about negotiation, they automatically send the police in, and it's usually a provincial police. We've been dealing with the provincial police, but the problem in Canada is that Indigenous people are ruled by something called the Indian Act, and the Indian Act is federal. It's a federal jurisdiction. So really, the OPP have no jurisdiction over us. So there's lots of confusion over which police can even deal with us, and the police are very frustrated just in general with Indigenous people. And so it gets pretty dangerous at these situations pretty quickly. And you can always see that the police are in support of white settlers. They hide them back behind the barricades. They make sure that they don't get hurt. Meanwhile, Indigenous people are just out there with no protection. This happens again and again. And what will probably often happen is that they would just like the Indigenous people just to go away. It's just much easier if we just went away and just, you know, just stopped, you know, asserting our rights, because, you know, it's a pain in the butt for them. They don't want to be out there. They don't want to protect us. So what they want to do is they want to, so there's always this tension between us and the police always. And we're trying to assert our rights, and there's always police around the corner just saying, you know what, we'd really like it if you just go away. And so they get very, very upset with us, and there's just so many stories. But I think I'm about up for time, right? With that.
Yes, but I could listen to you all day. Unfortunately, we have so many stories of this report.
We have some amazing people. Exactly.
But also we have
so that's a little bit about what's going on.
Yes, amazing people who resist and who are resilient and teach us how to care for each other and to care for and protect our land. I'm sure there will be lots of questions about the intersections of environmental justice in our Q&A. So thanks for getting us started on that, Celeste. Our next speaker is going to be Chantal Bateman. And Chantal is a mother, a Jill of maybe too many trades. I like to say a Jane or a Jana of too many trades. I love this. And a longtime member leader of About Face, Veterans Against the War. I was so lucky to meet them here in Cleveland during Meet About Face, the organization here in Cleveland, resisting against the Republican National Convention 4 years ago. And their work has inspired me all across the U.S. The collective is an amazing, amazing group of folks. Chantal is residing on Lenape land in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I wanted everyone to know something that moved me. The tagline in her email is a quote which reads, "Work is love made visible," by Khalil Gibran. Thank you so much for loving us through your work, Chantal, and for being with us today. Is anyone having trouble hearing?
She's muted.
You're muted. Yay.
Can anyone hear me? Okay.
Yay.
I think I'm on 2 streams, so I think I might have been muted by the host. I'm using my phone to use the audio. Sorry about that. I just was saying that I really appreciate the opportunity to be loved up on by this community of, fierce femmes out in the world, doing, amazing and beautiful things. So it's a pleasure to be here. I got to take the place of somebody who's really amazing and dope fit in the world, Brittany DeBarros. She and I got to talk a lot about what I would talk about during this talk. And essentially, I was going to kind of tell my own story of being a person who's tried to demilitarize themselves and also being a part of a community that's trying to do the same thing. And something that she and I talked about was how we're sort of all trapped in this house where the foundation is militarism and the walls are patriarchy and white supremacy, and we're all tamped down by this roof that is economic repression. So we're all like trapped in this house. So if I had a name for this talk, it would be Bored in the House, a feminist perspective on escaping militarism in the United States. But no, seriously, my story, I guess for the purposes of this talk, I'll start with me being in the military. So I used to be a Marine. It's not something that I'm proud of at all at this point in my life. My proudest part of being a Marine is that I'm not a Marine anymore. And why I joined the Marine Corps was, if you let my mama tell it, the stars I was born under made me a revolutionary, a person who believed in service and caring for people and fighting for what I think is right. And I grew up in a community where my schools were schools where there was constantly a recruiter for the military in my schools. Most of the folks who I went to school with, our parents were doing okay, but not okay enough to dream about saving money for college. They were doing good to save money for school supplies. So the idea of equating service and the military was always something that was funneled through our community. And at the time that I joined, 18-year-old me had no idea that the military's idea of service was about upholding the status quo. I hadn't read anything about the imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy that existed. That wasn't a book that was going through the curriculum at my public high school in Maryland. I don't know if y'all can hear the sirens. Sorry about that. But yeah, those were things that I was thinking about at the time. I just knew that I wanted to serve and I wanted to protect the things that I believed was right. And it didn't take long time for being a Marine before I figured out that there is no peace, no service that can come from the end of an M16. And there are stories that I could tell for days and days and days about how the process of dehumanizing the people that we're sent to go make war against, and the process of having to dehumanize ourselves, and the internal fight and struggle that happens in the microcosm of the military that creates this hierarchy of fight against each other, that made me realize that this can't possibly be how we create a better world. So I just started to try to figure that out for myself after I left being in Iraq, and just started reading a lot, trying to connect with other people who were doing the same. And by happenstance, I came across a group called Iraq Veterans Against the War. And that was in 2008. It was called Iraq Veterans Against the War. And it had formed not long after the Iraq War started. And it was mostly this group of people who had decided, for mostly political and a lot of times interpersonal reasons, that this war in particular was bad. We shouldn't do it. Weapons of mass destruction was a lie. And they banded together to try to fight against that. And in that struggle to fight and try to stop this war, a lot of us who were leaders at that young stage were also trying to figure out, well, how do you stop something from happening that's bad? How has it happened before? What have other people historically tried to do to create change? And we began studying history and studying leaders of the past. And I think one of the people that I latched onto, her teachings and her work, was Ella Baker, and her ideas about what leadership is and means, and how we create a world together by supporting each individual. And that's what service is. It's creating more space for each other. And as an organization, we were all trying to learn more and grab up all this kind of knowledge. We were looking to other organizations like the Coalition for Immokalee Workers and their work in solidarity with students and how they were forming their organization, the principles of organization, their principles of safe space. And as an organization, we just began to really wrestle with these ideas and try to think about what is not just war that's the problem, what is the bigger thing? What are the social philosophies? What are the political philosophies? What are the economic philosophies that lead us to war? And that's when we're like, aha, that is what militarism is. We can't just think about ending this war. We have to think about what it means to end militarism. And as an organization, we moved from being Iraq veterans against the war to about face veterans against war. And about face is a military term for turnaround. So we think of ourselves as having turned away from this idea of militarism and moving towards something else. And now we think about what it means to demilitarize the world, not just by ending a particular war, but militarism showing up in not just, like we said, direct war, but militarism is also in sanctions. Militarism is any and everywhere we use coercion rather than cooperation to create agreement with one another. It's spaces where, yeah, it's police in our streets, it's police in our schools. It's, yeah, like there's, you know, a note that I wrote down that I'm looking at my 1 minute, but it shows up in all these little places. And demilitarism is not just protest in the streets. Demilitarism is men watching the babies during the meetings. And things that we think of as feminist labor, things that challenge the notions that prop up militarism. And that's like what I would say is the crux of our work as an organization now, is both attacking the the way militarism shows up internally in our organizations, our interactions and our processes, and then how do we go out and confront that in the world in real and tangible ways that actually untangle things and not in ways that we often think of as vapid or white feminism a lot of times. So I got the warning sign. I'll let that Q&A go. But yeah, that's a lot of what the crux and focus of our work is.
I think it is so important to really dig deep into these subtle things in our society that really really indoctrinate people into militarism, particularly you're talking about military recruiters in schools, right? And we're talking about even the way that we talk to each other, even the advertisements that we see, the things that are marketed towards us. Oh my goodness. I think that this Q&A is going to be pretty powerful. Our next speaker is Camila Rodriguez from my Madre Tierra in Colombia. She is from Bogota in Cundinamarca. She's a woman, a feminist, an anti-militarist within the indigenous and feminist movements. And she's a researcher and specialist in epistemologies of the South. She's also a coordinator of the women's process within the convergence of knowledge and territorial action, and active in the anti-militarist coalition in Colombia. The convergence of knowledge and territorial action is an intercultural, feminist, and anti-militarist socio-environmental organization. And they work for the defense and enforceability of the rights of indigenous women and their territories, and through environmental, social, political, and legal actions. We are so lucky to have heard from all of these women. And so take it away, Camila.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Saludos a todas y a todos desde Colombia.
Hello, how are you doing? I'm sending greetings from Colombia to all of you.
Contarles a todas que Colombia es un territorio geopolíticamente estratégico de gran interés para la apertura económica global de Latinoamérica.
So I want to tell you that Colombia is a geopolitical strategic territory that has a lot of interest in the openness of the global economic of Latin America.
La riqueza de su subsuelo en materia de metales e hidrocarburos, su biodiversidad y las rutas marítimas y terrestres que permiten comercios legales o ilegales.
So it has a very rich land in metals and hydrocarbons. Also the biodiversity and the sea and land routes that allow illegal and legal trades.
Son algunas de las razones por las cuales Colombia está en el centro del juego del neoliberalismo.
These are some of the reasons why Colombia is in the middle of this neoliberalism play.
Pues las crecientes regalías que provienen de la explotación de los territorios mueven poderes e intereses nacionales e internacionales.
Because the recent royalty that come from the exploitation of the territory, they move powers and national interest and international interests.
Poderes interesados en que nada ni nadie impida el usufructo que obtienen de los territorios en el país.
So these powers are interested that nothing and nobody stop the usufructus that they obtain from the territory in the country.
Hace 60 años, Colombia atraviesa un conflicto armado interno cuyo intento de proceso de paz no ha llegado a buen puerto.
So since approximately 60 years ago, Colombia is going through a armed conflict, internal, that has the intent to make a peace process, but this has not been concluded.
Esta guerra nos ha dejado 9 millones de víctimas, víctimas de despojo, desplazamiento forzado, masacres, asesinatos selectivos, violencias sexuales y desapariciones.
So this war has left 9 million of victims, victims of dispossession, forced displacement, massacres, selective murders, sexual violence, and disappearances.
Una guerra entre ejércitos legales e ilegales, ejércitos insurgentes y contrainsurgentes.
A war that that is happening between legal and illegal militaries, insurgent militaries, counter-insurgents, and Camila?
Una guerra entre ejércitos legales e ilegales, que hacen presencia en los territorios a causa de una política de desarrollo económica que legaliza el despojo y busca legitimar la militarización de la vida como una estrategia de control territorial.
So this war is between legal and illegal military and has a presence in the territories that cause a political and economic development that legalize this position and that also seeks to legalize militarism in the life of the strategy to control the territory.
Y así resguardar los intereses económicos de empresas privadas, multinacionales y narcotraficantes.
And this seeks to look out for the economic interest of private businesses, multinationals, and drug dealers.
El contexto de la guerra y la subsecuente codificación bélica cultural ha desgarrado a Colombia a lo largo de la historia del conflicto armado.
So the context of the war and the subsequent cultural warfare has torn apart Colombia throughout the history of the armed conflict.
La securitización del país, es decir, como el sistema de seguridad creado primero como un discurso salvador y después como una práctica cotidiana normalizada?
So first, the securitization of the country has created, first of all, a salvation speech, and then it has normalized a day-to-day practice.
Ha abierto el camino para varios imaginarios sociales que en últimas buscan legitimar la militarización.
Normalize a day-to-day practice that has opened the way for several social imaginaries that they seek to legitimize the militarization.
Está entendida como el imaginario del soldado héroe que como pilar de la comunidad y motor de la seguridad nacional, la hipervirilidad como forma hegemónica y de performance de la masculinidad.
So, más corta, hermana, por favor. So it comes with the imaginary of a soldier hero that comes to be a pillar in the community, and also gives energy to the national security. It helps seeks a hyper-virility form and also a hegemonic performance of masculinity.
Gracias. Y de la violencia como método plausible para defender a la nación de las amenazas a la ley y el orden.
And also as a method, a possible method to defend violence and defend the threats to the nation using the law and order.
Así, poco a poco, la normalización de la militarización en la vida, cuerpos y comunidades
So little by little, the normalization of the military in the life, in the bodies, in the communities,
ha configurado una superposición de las Fuerzas Armadas y del sector seguridad.
so it has come with a superposition of the armed forces and also the security sector in the
En la sociedad colombiana, a tal punto que se han cobijado bajo estos imaginarios
Colombian society to the point that they had a shelter under this imaginaries to justify,
para justificar, minimizar y encubrir asesinatos y desapariciones.
justify, minimize, and also cover up murders and disappearances.
Los ejércitos en los territorios son los principales actores responsables de violencias sexuales y de género en conflicto armado.
So the militaries in the territories are the principal actors that are responsible for the sexual and gender violence in the armed conflict.
Estas violencias dirigidas a niñas y a mujeres racializadas
And the violences directed to girls and women are rationalized.
quienes se encuentran en el último eslabón de la cadena de poder,
So they find themselves in the last step of the power chain.
vienen de la mano de la impunidad y el silencio sistemático.
And they come hand in hand with impunity and the systematic silence.
Reafirmando el continuum de violencias
And reaffirming the continuing violence
y la violencia institucional que se promueve cuando no hay acceso a la justicia.
and the institutional violence that is promoted when there is no access to justice.
En un país donde las acciones militares han sido constantes,
In a country where the military actions have been a constant,
el uso de los cuerpos de las mujeres como arma de guerra
the use of the women body as war weapon
se instala en un círculo de utilización violenta, también fuera del contexto estrictamente bélico.
installs itself in the circle of using this violence to work it strictly in a war context,
En donde la violencia como método hace posible que la violencia sexual siga estando vinculada con el soldado héroe.
So this gives a method that makes it possible that a sexual violence is intrinsic, vinculated in the performance of the soldier hero,
siendo la militarización la expresión más violenta del patriarcado.
and being the militarism the most violent expression of patriarchy.
Adicional a la normalización del imaginario militarista,
So additional to doing the militarism imaginary a normal thing,
la violencia simbólica del machismo instaurada en la sociedad colombiana
the symbolic machism installed in the Colombian society
se abre paso para corporizarse en las manos de la institución militar.
so it opens a way to be part of the military institution.
Los 118 casos de violencia sexual solo en el 2020
There has been 118 sexual violence cases just in 2020.
cubren la superficie visible de una estructura que ha permitido por años
So they cover up the visible superficial structure, and this has allowed that for many years
que se reproduzcan códigos machistas y violentos.
that have enabled to violent codes are reproduced.
No es suficiente que salgan a la luz estas violencias.
It is not enough that this violence is shine light upon,
Sino que es absolutamente necesario que se rindan cuentas de los crímenes
so it's really necessary that there is accountability for these crimes
y que se reconfigure la estructura misma que produjo soldados
and that the structure, the same structure that is producing soldiers, is reconfigured,
que se sienten en la autoridad de hacer con los cuerpos de las mujeres lo que deseen.
because they have they feel that they have the authority to do with the bodies of the women whatever they please.
Ya para terminar, quiero solo dar unas cifras sobre la violencia militarista en Colombia.
So just to finalize my intervention, I want to share with you some statistics about the violence in Colombia.
Solo en agosto de este año, 47 personas fueron asesinadas en los territorios.
Just in August, 47 persons were murdered in the territories,
Principalmente en el Cauca, además de 56 personas en las masacres en Bogotá.
most of them were happened in Cauca. Also 56 persons were murdered in Bogotá.
218 personas asesinadas bajo crímenes de lesa humanidad.
And that makes 2018 persons that were murdered in crimes that against humanity.
Y más de 120 casos de violencia sexual a manos del Ejército y la Policía Nacional.
And
Solo este año.
And over 120 sexual violence cases that were committed by the military and the national police just this year.
Colombia es el país con más gasto militar en América Latina y el Caribe.
And Colombia is the country that has more military expense.
Con un gasto de 35,6 billones de pesos.
In Latin America with an expense of 35,000 billions of pesos.
Aún así, seguimos resistiendo por la defensa de la vida en todas sus formas. Gracias.
And even with that, we are still resisting to preserve and protect life. Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Okay, we are going to switch things up a little bit because of our time and wanting to make sure we're able to keep the dialogue. So we're going to move into Q&A, and then folks who would like to stay on after Q&A is over and watch the video, they're welcome to do that. But we have a short video from Cauca, from Colombia, of folks there. I'm sorry, my internet connection is a little unstable, it's telling me. I hope you can hear me. And so as we prepare for Q&A, I just want to remind folks that this event has been co-sponsored by the InterReligious Task Force on Central America and Colombia and Christian Peacemaker Teams. And we're both organizations that are committed to accompaniment work. And we are each two of the few organizations around the world that participate in unarmed civilian protection. And so we want to think about our active and disciplined behaviors that are really focused on community building and holistic accompaniment, which means, which the Colombia team taught me, really means physical, psychosocial, and political, as well as spiritual accompaniment, that we're embodying all aspects of our identity as we heal our traumas to support and defend each other in these moments. And that we really want to make sure that that no one part of us is elevated amongst the rest, that we are accompanying each other in solidarity based on our relationships. And so that is really important to us as we talk about the intersections, the cross sections really of what it means to be feminist or womanist, or a person promoting queer liberation from any part of the spectrum of gender identity. And gosh, there's just so many directions that we could go. Our first question is going to be for Celeste, and she mentioned that they may not only send police, but also send the army into the resistance that you're leading and supporting and part of. And has this happened for a long period of time, or is this a new practice?
Alrighty, the Canadian government, what they do is they do a tiered response. So you'll get regional police, then you'll get provincial police, then you'll get national police, and then you'll get the army. So at a lot of situations, we have 4 different types of militarization there. And then you also have armed response from settlers. So what's happening in a couple of situations right now is that, and they do some different tactics, but usually always the army is sent out. The kicker for that is they usually send the army out not when there are settlers there, but when there are large groups of indigenous people there. So so what they're scared of is indigenous people gathering in groups. So because they don't want that to happen, because if we do that, we can take back our power. And of course, we've been under the boot so long that they don't want that to ever happen. So it looks like they might send the military out to the Lobster in Nova Scotia. The region is calling for a higher militarization right now. And actually they specifically put in the fine print, they're concerned about non-local indigenous people. So there you go.
Here's a question for both Camila and Chantal, and that is, if we take away patriarchy and militarism from soldiers, what can we offer them in its place that could be appealing?
Well, that's not a hard question at all. No, really, that's a really difficult question. Something I heard, I wish I could remember the activist. It's a woman who has actually been organizing in Sweden, of all places, around anti-fascism work there. And something she said really struck me around the need to reclaim the narrative of patriarchy in our, not patriarchy, but rather patriotism in our history, and how we've ceded the narrative of what it means to be deep into our values, of what it means to engage in service, and we've ceded that to the notions of militarism. We've ceded that to white supremacy, and we've rejected the notion of what it means to be unified. At least I will say Americans have rejected the notion, because something I will say I've learned from folks who I've been able to work with who have been organizing in indigenous spaces, the idea of nationhood, of community, is real and solid and strong, and it's not an idea that is at all synonymous with a white patriarchal notion of nationhood and belonging to something. And I think when we reframe what it means to belong to each other, to belong to the land, and to belong to a nation, or for to be stewards over a land and each other and nation, is when soldiers will have something else to latch onto. Because it's not just service members who are latching on to a fucked up version of what it means to serve and to be part of a nation. It's all of us holding up this idea.
Camila?
Hola, ¿me escuchan? Ok. Bueno,
Sí, Camila.
el gran sistema es el patriarcal. El militarismo solo es una de sus expresiones.
So the big system is the militarism. Patriarchy is only one of the aspects.
Si no existiera, seguramente había un reordenamiento territorial.
And if it didn't exist, maybe there's a big possibility that it would be reorganized.
Donde nuestra pervivencia respondería al trabajo común y comunitario.
And the, to be able to survive would be very closely linked to the communitary work.
Y nos despojamos de lo aprendido culturalmente.
And we leave behind what we have learned culturally.
Podremos complementarnos en nuestras fuerzas vitales masculinas o femeninas, porque eso somos, complementarios.
And we would complement in a masculine and feminine way because we complement each other.
Y habría mucho que hacer en el trabajo comunitario por la pervivencia de los pueblos y comunidades desde...
So there is a lot of work to be able to do in community to be able to help out with this process.
Desde preparar la tierra, educarnos entre nosotras, los alimentos, o sea, todos los quehaceres comunes de la cotidianidad, solo que sin violencia y sin responder grandes órdenes.
Más corta, Camila, por favor.
Perdón.
So this would be working together, learning together, be able to exhort each other, and this will help us work together as a community.
Gracias, Karen.
I would also add just like something very tangible. Service members, soldiers, whatever you want to call them, and will follow orders and will work hard and do what is asked of them. You see that in examples of service members being deployed to places to build sandbags to protect people's homes from storms. And that is like work that we should all be able to do for one another in community and work that we all need done. And it's not something we think of putting folks who want to serve to work at all the time. We're constantly focused on a notion of protecting ourselves from invisible forces that, that's like deeper roots of untangling militarism.
Chantal, I would love for you to stay with us for a moment because we got a bunch of questions for you specifically. So I want to read a few and you can tie in your answers as best as you can. One person said, you talked about joining the military when you were young. Was there something that someone could have said that would have prevented your enlistment, or is there bigger strategy needed in that movement? Another question was, or a comment was, appreciating your articulation of coming to see how war is really just the face of deeper militarism that structures and binds our communities in toxic ways. So we were going deeper into that earlier with language and with community policing, right? And we all can think of immigration detention, deportation, mass incarceration, or just incarceration in general, right? The carceral state, the school to prison to pipeline, but also the school to military pipeline, right? We have different layers of these things. And finally, the last question for you is a question for Ms. Bateman from About Face. How, as we get closer to November, more and more people are accepting that the United States will experience an electoral crisis of unprecedented proportions. This side note is making me think of Karen, right? And I know we at IRTF have been following the Honduras Solidarity Network and witnessing the electoral coup that happened in 2017 in Honduras. And the question goes on to say, people of color and human rights activists are under increasing threat of violence from white supremacists and law enforcement. I can personally attest. Two groups with a lot of overlap. And are anti-militarist veterans organizing in hopes that the US military will either protect the people from white supremacist state and civilian violence or refuse orders from their commander-in-chief to use coercive violence to suppress protests. So I know that that is a lot, but tell us where you're feeling right now.
Yeah, so the first question about could someone have told 18-year-old Chantal, do not join the Marine Corps, and I would have listened. It's very unlikely there's a singular thing someone could have said, except for I have a full scholarship for you to pay for the next 4 years of college. That I think would have been truly the only thing that would have created an intervention at that moment for me. So I do think the answer is yes, it's a larger strategy for intervening for kids considering joining the military. There are a lot of folks who are engaged in truth and recruiting work, which I did a lot of when, or shortly after, I guess I came to wokeness, if you will. A lot of work where, yes, people who served in the military are coming back to combat a lot of the straight up lies that recruiters are telling kids to get them to join the military, and things that only a person who's been through the military and can tell you straight up, this is a lie, I know because I've experienced it, perhaps could have been an intervention for me. Having access to other opportunities to serve that were as weighted or as valued as the military. No one came to talk to me about joining the Peace Corps or City Year or any of the other opportunities that there exist for young people to both serve and not be worried about how they or their parents are going to make their ends meet. And so I think that some of the larger conversation is how do we create opportunities for young people for service that are not militarized opportunities for service and are also meeting their needs in real and tangible ways. Sometimes people offer young folks alternatives that, I'm sorry, could someone can you turn that down? My daughter's in the background. Who is, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yes, offering
no apologies needed.
people
This is
better
real
alternatives, parenting whilst zooming.
Yeah, that's
and
part of also modeling.
yes. So with what's going on right now with the election, so that's a separate question. So the first one is there's little that could have intervened in me at that very moment, other than someone supplying meeting my material needs at that time. My material needs were pay for college in a way that I can make my parents proud of, and not working where some of my other friends had to work to pay for themselves to go to college. In terms of what's happening with the upcoming election, yes, there are veterans. About Face in particular is coordinating efforts to train folks to be able to protect folks on their way to the polls, to be supported in that. We're also working to train other groups who are doing the same thing as part of coalition work, so that is happening. And About Face is constantly engaging in work to encourage service member resistance on multiple levels. And About Face thinks of resistance on a spectrum, so the spectrum from encouraging service members to be sharing this information throughout their units, having these conversations, challenging these notions with one another, to levels of resistance that could include whatever it is that they may do that could potentially prevent a mission from even going forward, whether that is you took the engine out of the Humvee or you made sure that people couldn't get to work that day because of traffic, those higher levels of resistance. But we think of it as a spectrum, and we're constantly encouraging and developing room for people who are currently serving to resist, as well as recent veterans to train folks in the things that they've learned in the military that are useful in direct action spaces. And I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's so much we have to learn from each other, and that there's unfortunately we also want to take care of ourselves and be present with our lives and our families. And so I'm grateful for the time that we've been able to share with each other. I have a few questions for Camila, and so I would like to offer some of those questions all together, and then Camila, hopefully you can answer some of them. One, que dice la Iglesia Católica sobre la violencia contra mujeres por los miembros de ejército? So what does the Catholic Church say about violence against women and their members especially? And also, can you talk a little bit about what the protests in Colombia have been like recently? We know, I know I've been following closely during COVID-19 about the uprisings in the incarceration system in the prisons, and as well about the, you know, similar protests in the same spirit of Las Vidas Negras Importan, in particular with the recent assassination in Bogota. So that's something that I'm also super interested in. And finally, what is the status of the peace process looking like today? Are there any significant investigations of sexual violence committed during Colombia's armed conflict that you can report on, or can there be a real peace process as long as the U.S. continues to provide military assistance to the Colombian government? And I'll interject really quickly as someone from the U.S. and Colombia, as a U.S. Colombian, that as long as homicides are the same rate as, you know, while the conflict is still going, to me, that's still real violence that obviously needs to be addressed, and we can't, you know, just gloss over that. So grateful to hear any of your perspectives on this, Camila.
Perfecto. El primer punto sobre la posición de la Iglesia Católica, bueno, acá hay aquí parte, verdad que toca traducir. La primera parte.
See, the first part of that, I forgot that I had to interpret. That's what she said. Well, the first part of that is asking about the Catholic Church.
Hay un movimiento feminista de mujeres católicas por el derecho a decidir.
There is a movement of Catholic women for the with the power to decide.
Ellas, por supuesto, rechazan todas las acciones violentas hacia los cuerpos feminizados.
So they definitely do not agree with the violence that is done to the females.
Hay muchas organizaciones sociales cristianas y jesuitas.
There are several Christians and Jesuit organizations
que trabajan por la defensa de los derechos humanos.
That work with the human defense, right?
Pero la Iglesia Católica como institución no se ha pronunciado.
But the Catholic Church as an institution has not come forward.
En cuanto a las movilizaciones,
regarding the mobilizations,
los pasados 9 y 10 de septiembre,
the past 9 and 10th of September,
la población civil se tomó el espacio público para manifestarse.
So the civil public took the space to participate in some protests.
Esta protesta se convirtió en acciones de hecho con
And this protest came as some actions
donde la policía usó el exceso de fuerza física.
Where the policemen came and did excessive violence against them.
dejando un resultado de 14 jóvenes asesinados por la policía,
and they murdered 14 youth,
300 manifestantes heridos,
300 protesters were injured,
66 por armas de fuego,
65 by guns,
93 policías lesionados,
93 police persons with injuries,
178 personas detenidas,
178 people were detained,
y una menor de edad violentada sexualmente en un CAI de la policía, en una comisaría de la policía.
and one minor, she was sexually abused in a police office.
Hoy nuevamente nos hemos movilizado desde las 10 de la mañana.
So today we also did some mobilizations since 10 a.m.
Desde el movimiento antimilitarista hemos gestado acciones directas no violentas.
And directly from the anti-militarism movement, we have been doing some nonviolent actions
En contra de la brutalidad policial.
against police brutality.
Y en este momento creo que hay disturbios, pero estoy acá, entonces tendría que ver cómo está la situación que se agravó, creo.
And right now, I believe that there are some protests and disturbances, but since I'm here, I really am not sure, but I do believe things have escalated.
Okay. En cuanto al proceso de paz,
Regarding the peace process,
desde la firma de la paz y en el inicio del posconflicto,
so since the peace firm and the non-conflict beginnings,
los territorios han sido ocupados por disidencias armadas,
so the territories have been occupied by armed movements
despolitizadas,
that are not related with the police. I'm sorry, with the political things,
no political,
non-political,
y grupos paramilitares
and paramilitary groups
que ahora ejercen control territorial económico,
that now have economic control,
principalmente del narcotráfico,
basically from drug dealing,
y también en actividades extractivistas.
and also in activities that are taking out minerals.
El gobierno actual está en contra de la implementación del proceso de paz.
And the the current government is against the peace process.
Redujo presupuesto para su implementación,
It lowered the budget for the implementation,
ha criminalizado y asesinado líderes y lideresas sociales en los territorios,
and also has criminalized leaders, female and male, in the territories,
y sostiene una impunidad casi que institucional por política.
and it's definitely has a political impunity in the territories.
Entonces, no, más que una implementación, hay una desimplementación del acuerdo de paz.
So instead of implementing the peace process, actually things have, they have not moved as quickly as they should.
Respecto de la pregunta sobre el gasto militar para los procesos de paz,
And in regards to the question of the of the expense of the military in the government?
Yo creo que no es posible definitivamente.
I believe that it is not possible.
Haciendo una lectura geopolítica de lo que también implica la paz como bandera institucional,
So also doing a geopolitical analysis of what this means,
también responde a intereses económicos del capital y de control sobre los territorios.
this also covers aspects of control and capital in the territories.
La paz no se hace con el Estado o dentro del Estado.
Peace is not done inside or with the government.
La paz se hace en las pequeñas acciones,
The peace is done through small actions.
en el cuidado de la vida, de la naturaleza, de la gente,
Taking care of the life, of the nature, the people.
la paz institucional, al igual que la guerra,
So the institutional peace, similar to the war,
termina siendo otro juego de poder
it ends being another war game, power game,
de aquellos quienes están en el privilegio y quieren mantenerse ahí.
power game that is being played by people that are already in power and want to remain there.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Mil gracias. Celeste, we had a question about what can folks do to help what's happening with the lobster fishers. And I saw that you put some resources in the chat, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that anymore. We need you to be unmuted.
Unmute. Thank
There
you.
you are.
Hi. Yeah, just real quick, I put some stuff in there. There's big support needed because more military is going to be coming in soon. There's actually a Google Doc floating around on I Don't Know More, the Facebook page. So go on there and grab that because it's really, really good. We really need to amplify Mi'kmaq voices, and we need to amplify Indigenous media. So I did put in a couple of things in there that there's some awesome coverage, and they need like some basic stuff. So if you can donate to the front lines, the Monica email is the way to go. Even like $5 to buy Sharpies and to buy signs and just to help coffee to feed the folks. So yeah, okay, awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I wanted us to find a way to wrap up on a similar page. So one of my mentors and one of the, the wise council members of IRTF, Maria Smith, asks this question. We're talking about getting people to show pre-election in the US, explanatory comma, that they will demand that all the votes are counted after the election. And for example, that they might commit to participating in a general strike and an economic boycott of major corporations unless they make it clear that they will demand that the electoral process be respected. And so I know everyone in this group has some level of experience with general strikes and boycotts. And I do want to let folks know, in case you don't already, that I've been grateful to be a part of the People's Strike effort. And the People's Strike effort is a coalition fighting for our lives, forging our future, that really was called together by Cooperation Jackson in Mississippi in the US. And we've been hearing a lot of talk about general strikes, but haven't had a lot of massive organizing around a general strike. So any thoughts or words of wisdom that folks could share around this particular suggestion for strategy? Go ahead and popcorn the answers too. Okay, everyone's so nice, I'll call on you. Chantal.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I was actually talking with Brittany about this today, and something that we're actually wrestling with this question as well is, you know, in a 1099 gig economy world, what is a general strike in this context, and not really knowing how to answer that question necessarily. And some of what we've been thinking about is, what does it look like instead of calling for a general strike, to think about particular industries and how do we all support a targeted or particular industry that would, clog up the works in a serious way, whether that is shipping and receiving, specific entities of the military, ports, etc. But how can we all put a lot of effort into a space, especially for those of us who, were always gig workers before now or going to be, and the idea of a general strike doesn't ring the same way as unions who are banded together, the way we historically think about general striking.
Camila?
Hola, ¿me podrías repetir la pregunta, por favor?
What are your thoughts about economic boycotts and a general strike as tactics for resistance in this moment?
¿Cuál es tu opinión acerca de los boicots y los boicots económicos como tácticas para utilizar en este momento?
Bueno, es completamente necesario. O sea, nosotros somos quienes estamos pagando el gasto militar con nuestro trabajo de impuestos.
I believe it's totally necessary because we are the ones that are paying with our taxes, the military expenses.
Muchas de las industrias acá en Colombia las sostenemos con el consumo individual
And many of the businesses here in Colombia are sustained by our support, individual support, because we consume the products.
y parte de esas regalías
And part of those royalties
va para la compra de armas, municiones,
and they go to the purchasing of weapons and all the necessary things.
y posibilita que haya cada vez más activos.
And this makes it possible that they continue purchasing, increasing the actives.
Así que si desfinanciamos y boicoteamos a quienes financian el gasto militar,
So if we do not economically support and we boycott in an economic way whoever are supporting the military expenses,
sería una acción contundente contra el militarismo, global incluso.
It would be a very important action against militarism, even internationally.
Gracias.
Celeste, what do you think?
I just put an answer in there, but I definitely think that a strike is needed. It's definitely, I'm obviously Canadian, I'm not American, but I think from what the people and the activists that I've been talking to in all of my networks, I think there's a hunger for it, and I think that it would be successful if it goes ahead. I think definitely big action is needed. And it's funny because some of us on the sidelines that are not in the US are like, ah! You know, come on guys, you know, get it, you know, do it.
Thank you. Yeah, we need solidarity here more than ever before. I'm thinking of.
I would also add something about that general strike, because something that I just thought about when you were saying like the hunger for it is there in the community, and I was like, yo, you're so right. In the organizations and activists I'm connected to, yes, it's totally there. But I live in what we would call the straight up hood in Southwest Philadelphia, where it is not what my neighbors are about. They're going to work every day and trying to feed their families. And even the notion of a general strike is like, wait, what? So I would say, in this time, especially along with we're doing so much education around the election and the electoral process, but the lack of inter-community education around resistance processes and options for that, and what that is and looks like, and how we're talking to our everyday regular neighbors, and not just our folks who we've been, you know, reading these very highbrow books with. What does it mean to bring down the conversation about a strike to the people who we actually need to not go to McDonald's and the grocery store to their jobs the next day?
Yeah, I was just gonna pull back in your comments about living in the gig economy. I know that that's something that my family members in Colombia are also very used to. You know, just like bartering and grinding on the street. And the informal economy makes up the largest percentage of people, of each individual person's participation in the economic system. And so the way that we participate has to be, yeah, definitely thought differently. And I think that very targeted things will be very useful in this moment. And also that the political education piece, I want to highlight that you mentioned that, because I think that's something really crucial. And I think I'm reminded that, you know, when of all of the reasons why people feel like they have to cross a picket line, or have to participate in these economies, for their survival, for their family members. And it reminds me of the Black Panthers Breakfast Program. It reminds me of mutual aid societies that have popped up, especially during the multiplicity of these pandemics. If we want to have a successful people's strike, we have to make sure that, as Chantal said, in addressing the question of like, what would a conscientious objector have to say to you to get you to not join the military when you did? It's really about meeting each other's material needs in this moment, right? And like prioritizing that sort of solidarity over charity. And that's something that a lot of us have been have been reminded of and taught of for a long time. So I definitely, there's a lot spinning, a lot to keep going, and a lot to mull over. I'm hopeful that each of us are able to build on these relationships that we've started to form today. It is an honor to be in space and share space with each of you. I wanted to send our regrets that Rosa Moyman couldn't be with us today from West Papua. She's an amazing liberation lover who I met at the Anti-militarismo en Movimiento Encuentro in Bogota last year, all the way from West Papua. And she has taught us so much as an Afro-Indigenous Pacific Islander about the climate crisis and anti-militarism, and just generously, you know, giving. The past week, she's been having really hard time accessing electricity and internet because of storms. And so we're thinking that maybe that's why she wasn't able to join us today. So if people could please send a prayer or a meditation or cast a spell, whatever suits you, as long as whatever morally grounds you is sending good intentions to our comrade, that would be, I'm sure she would be so grateful to hear that you did that. And I want to say thank you so much, everyone, again, one more time, just for giving us your time and really listening and being a part of these tables that we're creating for ourselves, instead of waiting to be a token on someone else's table. Here we are building the relationships that we need. And we know that your time is precious, and it means so much to us that you could be here today. We are going to bid you farewell. If you have to leave to take care of yourself, please do. But we're going to bid you farewell by giving you a little advertisement for a training that CPT is doing. And then if anyone wants to stick around and watch the video from Cauca and the Colombian community, that would be wonderful too. So Rochelle, how's that advertisement?
Yeah, I just want to add that CPT has been working hard, and we put together a 3-hour online training for communities who want to get prepared to hit the streets and protest and get prepared. Things are definitely intensifying up here in Canada. Things are definitely intensifying in the US. So this training will teach you skills in de-escalation, how to prepare for arrest, and even what to wear to go to a protest. So for more information, the link is in the chat.
Thank you so much. And Alicia, please close us out.
Okay.
It's an honor. It's been an honor to be with you all. Blessings.
Hola.
Un saludo de armonía a todos los hermanos y hermanas de este espacio. Soy Dora Muñoz, comunicadora indígena del pueblo Nasa de Corinto, en el norte del Cauca, Colombia. Con tristeza les contamos que la guerra en nuestro país no ha parado. Vivimos diversos conflictos, además del conflicto armado. Nuestros territorios siguen siendo invadidos permanentemente por diversos grupos armados, los llamados legales y también los ilegales. Todos nos amenazan, todos nos asesinan, todos siembran terror y todos están causando la muerte. Históricamente hemos sufrido el asesinato de muchas mujeres y hombres de nuestro pueblo, lideresas y dirigentes que defienden la vida, que exigen los derechos, han sido asesinados por los grupos armados. En el último mes, en nuestro país se han cometido más de 25 masacres. Definitivamente la paz sigue siendo un sueño al parecer inalcanzable. El pasado 13 de agosto, el Ejército Nacional asesinó al comunero Ernesto Rivera y a nuestro compañero comunicador Abelardo Liz, quien se encontraba realizando su actividad periodística, cubriendo una acción de desalojo por parte del ejército contra las comunidades indígenas de Corinto que se encuentran en el proceso de liberación de la Madre Tierra. Pero no solo la vida humana está en riesgo, también nuestra Madre Tierra está siendo asesinada. Se contaminan los ríos, se talan los árboles, se altera el hábitat natural de los seres animales y las plantas. Se desangra la naturaleza. Si no cuidamos la Madre Tierra, estamos condenados a desaparecer. Sin embargo, a pesar del genocidio que vivimos, desde los pueblos ancestrales del Cauca en Colombia, Les enviamos un mensaje de esperanza, de fuerza. A pesar de la guerra, nos negamos a la muerte y seguimos en lucha por la vida.
Por la vida, hasta la victoria. Thank you all.